My name is Bernadette Jones. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Visionova HR Consulting and Training. And I've spent over 25 years in human resources in HR because I had always been drawn to people, how we work, how we communicate, and how we thrive in the world of work. So, one thing I realized early on, something pretty simple, but it was powerful, and that was that people spend most of their waking hours at work. And if I could help them improve the 8 to 10 hours they invest in work, I could really help them improve their lives. So that insight has shaped everything I've done since. Over the years, I've worked across different agency industries as a certified HR leader, executive coach, facilitator, and public speaker. So today, a big part of my focus is taking everything that I've learned over those 25 years and distilling it into practical frameworks that leaders can use day to day in their actual day to day work. So not theory, not fluff, but real tools that help them have better conversations, build trust, and have more clarity and confidence in their leadership.
I love what you said there about how you really look at your role in HR and things like that about making this big chunk of our lives better. We spend so much of our waking hours at work, and HR and leadership, when done right, they accomplish that just that. They make people's work lives better, which I think ultimately make the
Mm-hmm.
rest of their life better. So that is just a great way to approach your work. And as you think about the work that you're doing, you've worked with a lot of different industries, lots of different leaders, and the work you're doing today. I'm sure that you encounter people that are really strong communicators. And I
Mm-hmm.
know I've worked with a lot of leaders and specifically HR professionals throughout my career that are great communicators. And I will say one of the things that I really do enjoy about the work that I do is that I get to work with a lot of folks in learning and human resources
Mm-hmm.
development. And it's always such a pleasure because I feel like the people that are drawn to working in HR and learning really do care about people so much. That's always been such a fun part of that. But back to what I was going to ask is with the interactions that you've had with folks, you've likely encountered lots of great communicators. So when you hear that, when you hear somebody being described as a great communicator or having strong communication skills,
Mm-hmm.
what's the image that comes to mind for you?
Well, when I hear that great communication skills, I think the image that comes to mind to me is not just someone who speaks well, but it's they connect well. They connect with people. So, of course, that starts with listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak, but actually listening. And it's also about learning or knowing your audience and how you message what you want to say so it actually lands with that audience. So you can say all the right words, but if people don't receive it the way you intended, then what you said just didn't land, didn't have the impact you really wanted. So great communicators, to me, this is the critical piece. I think great communicators know how to give feedback that people can hear, and just as importantly, how to receive feedback without becoming overly defensive. We're all humans, and when someone says, give you a little feedback, you may have a little defensiveness, but you need a great communicator can control that so the message is not lost. And that's a level of emotional intelligence. So you're aware of your message, how it might land, and you're intentional about building trust and not breaking it. So at the end of the day, if there's no connection, then there's no communication. So a good communicator is a great connector to me.
If I think about connection, right, the things that you talked about, the great communicators, they listen. They're not just waiting to talk. They really are listening to what you're saying. They really work to understand their audience so that their message is tailored for that particular audience. Because I'm sure, as from your work in HR, when you're talking to a group of salespeople versus maybe talking to a group of finance people, the way that you're going to couch that message is likely going to be a little bit different. And then I think the last thing you really hit on is that great communicators are coachable, right? They
Mhm.
can take that feedback,
Yes.
they can accept things and understand I might need to flex or tweak or change things based on the feedback that I'm getting from my audience, whether it is direct feedback that Bernadette, that message really wasn't resonating with
Mhm.
the audience or whatever it is, or the indirect feedback that you're picking up on when you're presenting and you're speaking. You see the arms are crossed, people
Right.
are leaning
Mhm.
back, you could tell they're tuning out. So you have to be coachable directly and indirectly when it comes to receiving that feedback.
Yes. Yes. And my experience, one of the challenges I see so many times with leaders is giving feedback. Most people avoid it. They avoid giving that feedback, or they give it in such a way that people just they tune out. They can't hear it. And so, what when I'm coaching, what I say all the time is that you want to give feedback people can hear, and so you have to start off with giving positive feedback, good feedback. And so then because there will be an opportunity, especially if you're a leader, to give feedback for improvement. But if you've been giving me good feedback all along when I've done something well, no big deal, just a short, great job. When you give me feedback for improvement, I can hear it because now I know you have my best interests at heart, and you're not just going to give me feedback when you're frustrated or there's something wrong. So giving that positive along with feedback for improvement, I think is a key for a good communicator.
People are human. I know it sounds
Hmm.
somewhat redundant to say, but if I think about with my kids, if everything that I'm saying to them is always correcting them or telling them how to
Hmm.
do things differently, and I'm never praising or verbally rewarding the things that they're
Right.
doing right, the things that they're doing well, the things that the recognition that they're getting, if it's always just the negative, as you mentioned, they're not going to hear it. At some point, it's just going to be noise. It's going to be
Hmm.
another critique. So you have to give feedback not only when there's an issue or a challenge, but on the positive side. And I think a lot of people miss that. They
Right.
think of feedback as it's the negative thing I'm correcting.
Mhm.
Feedback is positive as well, and you need to have a mix of both of them in order for people to hear you.
Exactly.
Bernadette, with the work that you're doing today, working with leaders, coaching people to help them be more effective, what are some of the key communication skills that either you're seeing people maybe they're doing well with and it's helping them thrive, or perhaps there's a gap, right? You're seeing a
Hmm.
consistent theme of this skill is lacking, especially in today's workplace, that ultimately people really need to work on if they want to grow.
Yes, I think that that's important. So these skills are soft skills, but they're necessary skills. So I think one of them that stands out for me in the workplace is intentional inclusion. So not just saying everybody has a voice, but actually creating the space for people to use their voice. And that really starts again, we go back to listening to understand, especially in the workplace now, because we have so many different perspectives. We've got different backgrounds, generations, all this diversity in the workplace. And so being intentionally inclusive is a critical skill for leaders. Emotional intelligence. So leaders today and employees are dealing with so much change and certainty. There's so many different expectations. So being able to navigate those tough conversations and respond thoughtfully instead of reacting is huge. A big thing to me, soft skill, is clarity. That's a big issue because people want to know what's expected of them, where they stand, and what's going on. And so when communication is unclear, then people fill in the gaps and usually not in a helpful way. So I think those are critical soft skills for today. I'd say the last one I think is adaptability, because what works with one person in the workplace is not going to work with someone else. So being able to be flexible in your communication style is critical when you're dealing with such a diverse workplace.
I love what you said about people filling in the gaps on their own. And you definitely don't want people filling in the
Mm-mm.
gaps because more often than not, they're going to go to likely the worst place with it or the negative spot with it. And it
Mhm.
brings me back to a prior career where I worked for a much larger organization, going through some tumultuous times where there's lots of restructures and reorganizations and layoffs. And it felt like every time a meeting invite came out, there was another change or another restructure. And to the
Mhm.
point where our COO sent out a calendar invite that was very vague, like team updates. And immediately my phone starts blowing up with phone calls and texts and email, like, what's going on? What's this about? So I had to call them. I said,
Mhm.
listen, you need to be aware of what's been happening here for the past several years. We can't just put out a vague calendar invite, this invite to the entire sales team. It's killing productivity because
Mhm.
people are now not focused on the clients. They're not focused on their job. They're worrying about what they're walking into in this meeting. And it was a very benign meeting. It literally was just some updates for the team. So we had to resend it and it calmed everyone down.
Mhm.
But you don't want to let people fill in the gaps because more often than not, it's not going to be what you wanted or intended it to be. And one of the things that you hit on was this idea of intentional inclusion. So what does that look
Mhm.
like in practice? As you mentioned, we have a
Mhm.
multi-generational workforce, globally dispersed, globally diverse workforce. What does that intentional inclusion look like in practice?
I think a big part of that is messaging. So when you are sending out that email or that message, you want to be inclusive. You want to think about how is this team member, how would they receive that message? How would they hear the message? When you're thinking about promoting or assigning work in the workplace, you want to really think about how can I be inclusive of this individual? Right? This person is a different background. So we have some older workers, some boomers in the workplace. Make sure that they're included. Make sure that the young people are included, so that you're intentional about that. So you're not just waiting for people to rise up and show that they're great, team members. You're actually looking for those people to help them rise up. Everybody, and that's where you bring that emotional, intentional inclusion, and then that's how you can elevate leaders from every background and not just be focused on those that have the confidence and the experience to jump in and do it, right? A lot of us come from different backgrounds where that's not necessarily who we are, who our family was. So we're not going to be as assertive. And some of us are more than assertive. And so we're going to be out front all the time, and we get seen. So we want to be intentionally inclusive and look for those people who are not out front but should be seen, and help them get to that point. And so that's what I'm about, being intentionally inclusive. It's
One of
thoughtful. It's not
the
just diversity for the sake of diversity. It's thoughtful.
one of the best examples that I think I've seen of that in action, with just understanding that different generations, different cultural backgrounds are going to have different levels of confidence, say, in speaking up in meetings, providing
Hmm.
feedback, right? So if you take a leader that comes in and says, okay, on this project, I think we should do A, B, and C. What do you all think? As the leader, I've just put out there what I think is right. Now, some people are going to feel comfortable raising their
Hmm.
hand and contradicting their boss in that particular meeting. A lot of people are not. Maybe younger workers that don't have as much experience or that aren't at the higher level within the organization might not feel comfort doing that. Different cultural
Hmm.
backgrounds might not feel comfortable. Versus if I come in as the leader and say, okay, we have this project going on. What do you all think about it? Getting their feedback, their thoughts before I provide my feedback as the leader is a great way, I
Hmm.
think, to be intentionally
Yes.
inclusive and not add any color to it before I get
Hmm.
everyone's thoughts around.
Exactly. That is a great skill as a leader, to be able to hold back sometimes, and let other people speak first. I like that.
Bernadette, as you think about the success that you've had throughout your career, and if I were to ask maybe someone close to you, colleague, friend, family member, if they had to pinpoint it down to what's that key communication skill that has helped Bernadette be successful in her career, what would they share with me?
I think they would share listening, really listening. People tell me, I'm a good listener, and I really have worked at being a good listener, and then asking good questions. So in HR and coaching, you don't always have to have the answer. And it took me a while to realize that, okay, I know the answer, but just, you don't have to have the answer. In fact, it's sometimes you're more effective when you don't. You don't jump in with the answer, but you ask the right questions, which helps people to think differently, to take ownership, and then also helps them to come to a better solution on their own. Um, and so it goes listening that goes beyond tone, body, it goes into tone and body language. And I always say what's being avoided, what's not being someone's avoided saying, and what's not being said at all. And usually that's where a lot of the story lies. So asking good questions and listening helps you to build trust quickly, and helps you to move the conversation forward. So I think those are the two.
What would you suggest to someone who does have struggle or who struggles with really effective, active listening? They find themselves always thinking about what they're going to say next, or
Mhm.
maybe drifting or wondering and anxious about what's coming next, the next meeting. What are some tips and strategies really to help hone in on those listening skills?
I think there's one. a quick, simple one that I learned when I was in a deposition. The attorney who was working for a consulting firm, and it was a lawsuit an employee brought years after the fact. And so I had to come in and because I had consulted with them. And my attorney, when she prepared me for the deposition, she told me something. She says, whatever they ask you, pause for 5 seconds. Don't answer the question. Even if they ask you your name, she said, pause and think about it before you answer the question. And that has helped me so much to slow down and really listen to what people are saying. So I think that's a quick tip. If we can just pause after someone speaks, when they ask you a question, and just take it in before you respond, that will help improve your communication so much. And that's a simple, but really, I think, a very valuable tip that I learned.
Pausing in your communication and being comfortable to sit in that silence
Mhm.
is a superpower. And it is something that you can easily work on at home and at work. Now, you
Mhm.
don't necessarily need to start at 5 seconds. That might be hard for somebody to start at 5 seconds.
Right.
Get into the habit of when somebody finishes their sentence, give it 1 to 2 seconds
Mhm.
before you start speaking. You'll notice a number of benefits. One is you're likely going to answer the right question or respond to what that person was actually saying. You're going to feel more calm. Your nerves are going to come down a little bit. It's going to slow down your response, which will in turn start to cut down on the filler words that you use that can pull away
Mhm.
your credibility. So, absolutely love the pause there. That is a tremendous skill to work on that anyone can practice. Try it at home with your kids, try it with your family, then start to bring it into work on client calls or team meetings. It will definitely have a big impact.
Yes.
Bernadette, who's someone that from throughout your life or career has had an influence on your communication style, right? Maybe the way you communicate or something, a skill that you've learned from someone, perhaps a mentor that you somewhat made your own and it's now part of your communication style.
Sure. So there's one moment that I think about a lot, and this was some years ago. I was consulting with a nonprofit client, and we were doing some culture work. So I had done some research to bring in another consultant to help executive coach. And so I was working with this coach, and I was getting a little frustrated with the client, something they said or did. I can't quite remember what it was, but I had already made up in my mind what that behavior was about. And so I was venting to this coach. And she said to me, what? She said, you don't actually know why she did that. You're filling in the blank. So what if you told yourself a different story? And that really stayed with me because we all do that. We don't have the full story. So we create one based on our lived experience and what's happened to us in the past, maybe a workplace trauma, whatever that is. But that story probably isn't accurate, right? Or it may not have you don't have the complete story, so it's not going to be completely accurate. And so, and the part of that is most of the time that's not the most generous story that you could tell yourself. So since then, I've tried to ask myself what else could be true. And I've also shared that with the leaders that I work with. So when employees don't get feedback or they don't get the full story, like we mentioned earlier, they fill in the blanks. That's why communication is so critical because more often than not, when you get the final context, the full context of the story, your assumption wasn't right or it wasn't complete. So that shift changed how I respond in situations and how I coach others to respond to them. Is why don't you think about it a different way? Tell yourself a different story. Maybe that's not the right story to tell. And that has been so helpful in my work life, personal life.
What else could be true? I absolutely love that framework of looking at a challenge or looking at some situation and understanding I am projecting my own experience
Mhm.
onto this, my own journey onto this. Likely that other person has gone through something completely different from me. So I need to think about what else could be true? What could be driving this particular behavior? And thinking about it through that lens, which I think if you start doing that, it's going to ultimately build up that curiosity muscle
Mhm.
where you get to a point where you're going to lead with that curiosity, start asking more questions before you jump right into conclusions. So for
Right.
me, as somebody that's a natural problem solver, as soon as I hear something, boom, I just want to jump in there and try and fix it through my lens. But over time, I've been working to really slow down a little bit, ask more questions, think about it from different perspectives, really getting in that other person's shoes, and then starting to maybe go into solution mode or understand, do I need to be in solution mode? Do I just need to be in listening mode?
Right. Right.
Help that other person draw their own conclusion, like you had mentioned earlier.
Can I say one more thing about that? I think this is much more important now since COVID, because prior to COVID, leading up to COVID, I was getting a lot of calls from clients around employee mental health and even their own burnout. Since COVID, it is astronomical. And so people are experiencing things in ways that you maybe they didn't in the past. And they're dealing with different workplace traumas. And so for some people, when they hear feedback or some improvement that's needed, they freak out because of some workplace trauma they had in the past. And so being conscious to know that a reaction may not actually be to what I said or what I did, it could be to something that's happened in the past, and being able to say, okay, what else might be true can be so helpful now, because we're in a time where people are just overly stressed and concerned and are taking a lot of it from work, but then also bringing it in. And so we have to be conscious of that.
Absolutely. Bernadette, as we are wrapping up, two closing questions. You can take them in either order that you
Okay.
wish. First, if people want to get in touch, learn more about the work that you are doing, what's the best way to do that? And I'll make sure I put it in the show notes. And then second, what piece of closing advice would you have to folks listening to this, just really around the importance of developing their communication skills?
Well, I would say don't underestimate, first, for those who are new in their careers or developing skills, don't underestimate how much communication skills really matter. So, yes, technical is important, but how you listen, how you ask questions, and how you express your ideas is what's going to set you apart in the workplace. Ask for feedback and be specific, not just how am I doing, but maybe like, well, what's one thing I can improve in meetings? And then actually take that feedback and use it. And then give yourself time to grow. Communication is something that you build on over time, but the more intentional you are about it early on, it's going to be able to open more doors for you later on. So that would be my advice regarding communication in your career. And then to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can contact me on LinkedIn, or my website is visionovahr.com, and it's visionovahr.com. So please get in touch, and I have some wonderful frameworks that leaders can use to really work on their communication skills.
Perfect. I will be sure to put that down in the show notes. And I think you really nailed it when it comes to these communication skills. This is a marathon, not a sprint. They're going to
Mhm.
continue to develop and grow over time. You're not going to become a master communicator in 48 hours.
Right.
You're going to learn some skills, you're going to apply them, you're going to practice them, you're going to get better. You're going to learn some more and apply and practice and get better. I'm fortunate in my position where I get a lot of practice, and I get a lot of
Mhm.
practice on video. So I've been able to go back and see over the past, gosh, probably 5 years now that, for example, I've been doing this podcast. From when I first
Mhm.
started to now 120 episodes deep, I've noticed a tremendous amount of progression. If I look back to some of the social media videos that I did when I started here 8 years ago versus now, while I was already a solid communicator then, the
Mhm.
level has gone up because I'm getting the reps in, I'm watching myself, I'm critiquing myself, and then I'm open to feedback that I receive from others. So, spot on advice. Bernadette, thank you so much for joining me. Really did enjoy our conversation.
Thank you so much, Scott. It was a pleasure.
Take care.
You too.